Final few minutes with Lord Christopher Monckton here on the program today. And Lord Monckton, it is interesting where in the 70s in this country, the alternative energy industry was starting to get a foothold. And people were starting to convert to solar and the like. And then it just stopped because, of course, we had the energy crisis during the Carter administration and the like. Then it stopped. And it appears that since then, at every turn, these same interests that want this treaty have done everything they can to keep people from taking on these alternative energy technologies.
And yet at the same time, they're pretending that they're trying to encourage these alternative energy technologies. And I think it's very difficult to work out what is going on, but there are so many competing vested interests that have managed to line up on the side of this climate nonsense that what you can be quite sure of is that there are a lot of people out there trying to get rich at the expense of the little guy. What this treaty is all about is taking away your individual freedom and prosperity. It's not just about your nation's freedom and prosperity, it's yours as well. And so now, of course, if you want, I've been traveling all over America in the last 6 weeks talking about this, and I've found that more and more people are preparing to fear the worst, essentially. I mean, there was a neurosurgeon down in Texas, perfectly sensible person, not a kind of redneck survivalist at all. And he was putting in diesel storage tanks in his land. He was putting in grain storage, feedstocks, so that he could grow his own supplies. He was fencing his property in to keep other people out. There's a real feeling of fear that now your administration is no longer serving you, it is serving an alien entity somewhere else for purposes that have nothing to do with advancing the interests of the United States or any of her citizens. Now, I hope I'm wrong about this. I shouldn't be making political remarks about your administration. What I can say is this treaty at Copenhagen contains provisions which should not still be in that treaty after this administration's negotiators had looked at it. They should have taken them out, and yet they're all still there. World government, powers of that government to tax you, to make you behave in various ways, to tell you what kind of automobile you can drive or whether you can have one at all, what kind of light bulbs you can use. Interference at every level, and that interference will grow down the years. The treaty says this. More and more powers will accrue to this new, hideously expensive, hideously powerful world government, unless you stop it by getting onto your senator and saying, over my dead body, do you ratify the Treaty of Copenhagen? This treaty shall not pass.
Yeah, one of the things with a lot of my listeners are looking to grow their own food, are putting food back, and many are looking to be off the grid completely as far as their power needs, all of that. And there's been a big push. I have a friend who owns a seed company, and the market for seeds for people to grow on their own that are not that haven't been through Monsanto's Terminator seed program has gone up over 300% in the last year.
I'm not at all surprised. One of the nastiest things that I have observed in going through America on this trip is real fear on the part of a population which, if it knew that its freedoms were secure, would have nothing to fear. But there is real fear, not fear of terrorism, not fear of foreign invasion, fear of subversion from within by their own administration. And that is why I think the results in Virginia and New Jersey particularly are so very interesting, because here, right close to Washington itself, that fear has come through in throwing out representatives of this administration and replacing them with representatives that do not take this administration's position on these things. And I think that the president, if he wishes to remain president, is going to have to listen very carefully to the results of those elections. I was astonished when Nancy Pelosi said that those election results were a victory for the Democrat Party. And if that kind of mendacity is now routine in the Democrat Party, then I fear for America. I think that the time has come now to protect yourselves against what your administration is trying to do to you. When I attended a Tea Party rally in Texas recently, the people sitting next to my lovely wife and me were people who had never voted Republican in their lives. And they came to that Tea Party rally precisely because it wasn't a Republican rally. It was a rally of ordinary people with ordinary concerns about the future survival of their democracy and their freedom and their nation. These were patriotic, quietly patriotic people. They had always voted Democrat before, but they had come to this rally where they had been told by the newspapers it would all be wall-to-wall Republicans, and it wasn't. Democrats, too, are frightened of what this administration is doing. It no longer represents those even who voted for it. And one of the biggest damages that the cap-and-trade bill will do is that it hits the small guy first and foremost. It makes the big utilities and the big corporations wealthier. But who is going to lose? Answer, the small guy. It's always the small guy that loses when you get this kind of policy of deliberate centralized government interference. It's never made for the sake of making the small guy better off.
Yeah.
It's designed to make the small guy a lot worse off, not just economically, but also in terms of his democracy and his freedom.
Yeah, and in this country, there's been an agenda since really the founding of the Federal Reserve to blow out what was the unintended consequence of the Revolutionary War, and that's the middle class.
That's exactly it. They're trying to destroy not only the middle class, let's get this clear, but also the working class. They are trying to rearrange everything in politics just to serve a tyrannical, narrow, very extreme left-wing, communistic elite. And that elite now wishes to make all of us, effectively, its slaves. You thought you'd abolished slavery under Abraham Lincoln in that Civil War where 650,000 of your soldiers died on one side or another of that conflict, so as to decide the question whether there should be slavery anymore. And it was decided there would not be slavery anymore. And the first thing that your president did when that was decided was to have the anthem of the South, Dixie, played by a band on the White House lawn. That was how he healed the nation then. Now we need a similar healing of the nation. We need your president to stop acting like a campaigner for the extreme left and to start governing for the people as a whole, defending the interests of this country and of its people against this alien tyranny, which, in the name of addressing the non-problem that we now know the climate to be, would impose a dictatorship over us. And let's talk about this non-problem. It's now been proven by direct measurement at several points in the atmosphere that the vast Xbox 360s and PlayStations the UN uses to do its computer models are simply getting it wrong, time and time and time again, in important ways. And every time they get it wrong in the direction of exaggerating the effect of CO2 on temperature. It's clear that they're being bent so as to produce the wrong answer. And now that we know what the right answer is, which is a warming of roughly 1 Fahrenheit degree over the whole of the coming century, even if we don't cut back any of our CO2 emissions. We know that, therefore, there is no longer, even if there ever was, the slightest purpose in setting up a world government to solve this non-problem. And as I've said earlier with the figures we did briefly, there's no longer any economic basis, even if there were a scientific problem. There is no basis whatsoever in reason or rationality for doing anything whatsoever about the climate. Just leave it alone and it'll look after itself.
Lord Monckton, thanks so much for being on the program today. This hour has flown by so quickly. And thanks for joining us today.
Real pleasure. Thank you very much. God bless America.
Thank you. All right. Lord Christopher Monckton, our guest.